You're listening to the Friends Talking Nerdy Podcast Network.
Friends Talking Nerdy. If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I want to talk to you. Friends Talking Nerdy.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim Jousma coming at you alone again this week. The Reverend Tracy, as mentioned, is off for about a month because the Reverend is having a wonderful time with your stepkids. So if the Reverend is listening to this, I hope you are having a wonderful time because the pictures you have sent, really show you are. So continue to enjoy yourself. So what are we going to do this week? Coming at you solo. Obviously, we're not going to have one of our hour and a half shows here. Being that it's me alone, what I love to do in situations like this is come up with a quick playlist, because music in a lot of ways is kind of a peek into a person's soul, and being able to talk about music that I like from particular eras and whatnot is a way for me to be able to let you guys in the audience know just what I like, and also too opens up some conversation, because if I miss something, it gives you a chance to let me know. You're able to go to any of our outlets on social media or the internet, whether that be our website, friendstalkingnerdy.com, or heading to our Facebook group where we are most active, and joining and saying, Tim, your music choices suck, or I liked most of them, but why didn't you include this? We want to encourage the conversation. So what I've done is this. I've collected my 10 favorite songs from the year I turned 10 in 1986, and then we'll go down it. The tracks here are in no particular order, so there was no scientific measurement to find out what was actually the 10th best or anything like that, because this is just all my opinion. But again, I hope you all take the time to hear my choices, listen to that playlist, and hey, again, I'm open for conversation. If there's something I missed, let me know. But let's go with the first one here. It's from Ozzy Osbourne. During this time, I was still a little scared of him because of the image that he had at the time. Like today, when people think of Ozzy Osbourne, you think of a more drugged up goofball more than anything else. You don't think of him as this evil mastermind. Yet in the 80s, in the midst of satanic panic, when Ozzy, did his thing, Ozzy loved to fuck with people. So he had an image of a wild guy that really wasn't much of an image. A lot of it was true, but he also loved pressing buttons with people as well. So honestly, I think the Ozzy Osbourne we see today is probably the Ozzy that was there in the 80s as well, but it was still somewhat the height of his popularity, and again, people thought he was evil and scary. But then this song comes, Shot in the Dark. It was kind of a ballad, and in the past, Ozzy has done some very sweet ballads. I mean, if you've not heard the song Changes from Black Sabbath, give it a listen. I mean, you've already heard the song if you watch the show Big Mouth. They did use a version of that song as the theme song, but they've also played the Black Sabbath version on that show as well. But Shot in the Dark, I wouldn't say it's Ozzy's greatest song ever or anything like that, but for the time, I mean, it shows a maturity that as a musician for Ozzy, that I don't think people give him credit for. So definitely one you should check out. The next one on the list here is an absolute classic of the heavy metal genre. It is Master of Puppets from Metallica. Metallica, back in the day when they created, songs like this, I mean, this is like a work of art. I mean, it's will go down as probably one of the best examples of what heavy metal can offer. 8 minutes plus. I mean, really, what more is there to say about Master of Puppets? It's one of their absolute best songs. Sadly, we never saw like a video for it. The Metallica didn't start doing videos until their next album, Injustice for All. Being that this was from '86 too, I mean, I think this is the last album that Cliff Burton, their original bass player, played on as well. So, you know, if you're gonna go out with one heck of a classic album, am I right? All right, the next track here is from Van Halen. It is from their 5150 album. It is the debut album of Sammy Hagar as the lead vocalist. Some folks have called the band Sam Halen or Van Hagar during that era. Like, if you listen to both versions of the Van Halen band, the Roth era and the Sammy Hagar period, they really are two different bands. You know, the music that Van Halen was playing with David Lee Roth was not the music they were really playing once Sammy Hagar came around, just because David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar have different ways of singing. You know, like Sammy, if you listen to some of the live tracks where Sammy would actually sing some of the David Lee Roth era songs, he really wasn't comfortable with it because, again, he's not the type of singer that David Lee Roth is, and vice versa. David Lee Roth is more of the traditional rock guy, kind of posturing, and, you know, he's more emotions, whereas Sammy Hagar is he's technically a better singer. I don't like saying better singer because that's all relative in the area of rock and roll. There have been people who don't have great voices who still put out great albums. So, but you do have to take into account the types of music that a particular singer can accomplish. And this song in particular, Why Can't This Be Love? David Lee Roth could not have pulled that off. That is, again, not knocking David Lee Roth in any way, shape, or form, but this is not a song he would have done well at, and it's a song that I don't think he would have liked, period. But, you know, with Sammy in the band, it was really, really good, so I really dig that track. The next one is from Poison. I know some rock fans out there would be like, ew, why? And I don't proclaim that Poison is the greatest band on the face of the earth. They're not, but they're also not bad either. I mean, they're fun for what they are. You know, they're like Motley Crue light, I agree, but when, you know, they do get together for certain tracks like this one here, Talk Dirty to Me, it's goofy, it's silly, it's fun. I mean, it's almost like the Sesame Street version of rock and roll, if that makes sense. This is the type of rock that is perfect for like a teenager to hear and to inspire them to go on to do something else, because once they start playing music on their own, they're going to realize how simple this song is and then discover other bands and hopefully learn some more. You know, again, I'm not knocking Poison. You know, Poison, they're kind of like a greatest hits band for me. They've put out just enough to, you know, if they put out a good greatest hits album, I'm going to buy that, but, you know, Talk Dirty to Me, still one hell of a good track. The next track here we've talked about on the show a few times before, and it is honestly probably the song that helped put hip-hop on the map in terms of it being what it is today. That is from Run DMC. That's Walk This Way, that featured Aerosmith. You know, sadly at this time, rap music was not getting much attention on MTV. I don't know if Yo MTV Raps had started just yet. If it hadn't started in 86, it, you know, was going to debut in 87 or 88. So it was close, but MTV still was not giving the attention to hip-hop or black music in general. And Rick Rubin, who produced this track, had the foresight to see that, hey, if we have this group, Run DMC, do a cover song of a famous rock and roll, from a famous rock and roll band, and invite a couple of members of that band into the video, you're going to open some eyes. It was a really smart move, and more than anything, it showed, you know, like Run DMC, it showed how good Run DMC was. It showed how good hip hop could be, and it was a thing. And I can tell you, I mean, I was 10 years old at the time, strictly a rock and roll fan, but this is something that really opened my eyes to what hip hop could do, and, you know, that is a beautiful thing. And so this track is by far probably one of the most important tracks in 20th century music history. I don't say that lightly, but, for what it did for hip hop, it not enough can be said about just how good Walk This Way was. Let's go on to the next track here. That is from Genesis. This, by far, had to be their most popular album with Phil Collins, and it's the title track from the album, Invisible Touch. I mean, at this time, Genesis and Phil Collins, like, anything they did ended up going platinum or whatever, and like it is weird on the one hand looking back and seeing that, like Phil Collins was in his mid-30s, he looked like a little troll, and the other guys looked like professors in the band, yet it was still a time to where groups like that could still make popular music that could speak to a broad range of people. Unfortunately, music today, like other entertainment, is so micro-focused on pleasing just a very specific audience that, something ends up missing from there. There is something to be said about wanting to make music to attract the biggest possible crowd you can, not the crowd you can get. And, Invisible Touch from Genesis showed you could do that. The next track here, I believe this is the last album that the Talking Heads did as a band. And it's a song from this album that I really, really dig called Wild Wild Life. Not enough can be said about the Talking Heads. Again, a legendary band, started off in the 70s. Their reputation speaks for itself. This is just one heck of a good track. And again, for a song on one of their last albums, the fact that they were still able to, put out songs this good, it's like, what if they had been able to stay together and, put out a couple of other albums, or maybe do a reunion tour? I don't know. But at least we have this on record, right? All right, the next track here is from the Beastie Boys. Beastie Boys in '86 released their first album, Licensed to Ill, and one of my favorite songs off that album is Paul Revere. You do have to take into account that at this point, the Beastie Boys hadn't fully... They were appropriating in sometimes inappropriate ways, if that makes sense. And like, I think they've been more than vocal about that at the very beginning of their career. Also, too, this album was on Def Jam Records, produced by Rick Rubin, same as the Run DMC album. And one thing to keep in mind is that a number of tracks off of License to Ill were originally supposed to be for Run DMC. So even though this album is a classic for the Beastie Boys, it's not really their voice yet. Their next album, Paul's Boutique, would definitely speak more to what the sound they were looking to give. But this is still a classic album. And yeah, Paul Revere, probably one of my favorite songs from this album. The next song here is from Paul Simon. We've talked about this on the show before when we reviewed the album Graceland, where the song comes from, but I would be remiss if I didn't put You Can Call Me Al on this song. Probably one of the more upbeat tracks off the album. The rest of Graceland was more kind of mellower type songs, and that's okay. I mean, I definitely love the album for that reason, but this song here I really dug for being upbeat, and also the video too, with Chevy Chase doing the lip syncing with Paul Simon throughout. It was a goofy video, showed you don't have to do much with the video or spend a ton of money to still make something memorable, so if you can, check that out. Now, the last track on this playlist here, you gotta go with some more hip-hop. I mean, 86 in a lot of ways was the year that people started really paying attention to hip-hop in a lot of ways. And it was thanks to bands like this right here, Salt-N-Peppa. Salt-N-Peppa this year came out with the song Push It. Now, when I'm 10 years old and I'm hearing that song, all I'm doing is giggling like Beavis and Butthead, But Salt-N-Peppa were a really good band. Now, part of me wonders why some of these older hip-hop bands aren't as big as like their rock and roll equivalents, but I think about it like this too, like Salt-N-Peppa, their main years were the 80s, and if we're doing time, the time difference between the 80s and now was similar to the time difference between the 1950s and the 1980s when I was a kid. And while there were certainly musicians from the 50s that were still making music that was still being bought up by the masses, it's not like there were a whole bunch, you know. And unfortunately, what I didn't realize as a kid is that, you know, the older an artist gets, sometimes their music doesn't necessarily strike a chord with people 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the road, which is okay. It's just a par for the course of art. You know, not all art is going to strike a chord with people for all of time. Sometimes stuff goes away. But, you know, when you do see talented people like Salt-N-Peppa, and you see that they don't necessarily get the love and attention that they should, you know, it makes you wonder, you know. Now, like, part of the issue too is like the music press, for instance. The music press still primarily white, and you know, their main focus, of course, is on legacy white bands. But yeah, if you get a chance, find a Salt-N-Peppa album, put it on, listen to them, because they were great. And I think we'll wrap it up here. We are in unprecedented times here, folks. As we mentioned last week, Roe v. Wade is officially gone in the United States, and that has put a lot of women in despair and in distress, rightfully so. So, like I said last week, if you have a chance, find a way to support the women in your life on this particular issue. Learn about abortion, learn the pros and cons. We have an episode in the past discussing some of the pros and cons of abortion. Be able to speak about it. Also, support charities out there that are doing their best to fight for the women that need help in this particular time, as well as fighting to make sure politicians don't let this pass by, because, you know, the Democratic Party, right now, I mean, there's enough to say about the Republicans, but the Democrats are weak and ineffective, and like the only way we're going to get any sort of closure on this in a way that helps people is if we all fight in effective ways. You know, again, supporting organizations that are going to be able to help much more effectively than just the average person, as well as we all need to get out and vote. So this year is probably going to be one of the most important years in this country's history, and will determine the future. So again, please do what you can to support this issue. And thank you all for listening. We appreciate you taking the time every week to listen to us, whether it's for the entire episode or for a few minutes. We appreciate you listening. So thank you all very much, and we will see you again next week.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.